IELTS Listening, version 50906. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Part 1. You will hear a conversation between an assistant in a post office and a customer who needs to send a package overseas. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 8. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 8.
Hello, can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to send this package to the USA urgently, but I'm not sure what the best way of sending it is.
Well, first of all, when does it need to get there?
Well, it's Tuesday today. It's absolutely got to be there by Friday. Ideally, I'd like it to be there by Thursday, but I realise that might be difficult.
Okay, well, there's courier post, but that takes 4 working days, so that would be next Monday. Or a slightly more expensive service called International Express, which will get there in 3 working days.
Okay, I'll use that then. It's really got to be there as quickly as possible.
Okay. Can I just take some details from you for the form? First of all, what's your name?
Peter White.
And your address?
14 Mountain Road.
And where's that?
That's in Lakeview.
Okay, now who are you sending the package to?
Anna Hillman. That's Hillman.
And what's the address?
Apartment 228, North Building,
Okay.
Upper Park Avenue,
And what city is that in?
New York.
Now, I need a description of the contents of the package, just so customs know what's being sent.
I'm sending books.
How many are you sending? I need to give the number.
And there are 6 in total.
Right. And is there anything else in the package?
Yes, some photographs.
Okay.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 9 and 10. Now listen and answer questions 9 and 10.
Now, would you like to insure the contents?
It might be a good idea.
All right. Now, can we just weigh the package and I'll tell you how much it's going to cost?
Here you are. It's heavy.
It's just over 4 kilos, so let's see, that's going to be $98 altogether.
Will I be able to get a receipt with that?
Yes, of course. Now, if the package gets lost, you should contact us as soon as possible. It's very unusual for anything to go missing, but just in case, your receipt has an ID code on it which we will need to be able to trace the package.
Right. So will I also need to bring in the receipt and the delivery form to you if it does get lost?
No, you can just give us a call with the ID code, okay? Now, is there anything else I can help you with?
No, that's all. Thanks for your help.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2. You will hear a guide talking to a group of tourists who are going to spend a day on an island. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Well, morning everyone. Welcome to Palm Island. First, I'll run through the plan for the day. So, the idea is that in the morning you'll go for a walk. There are actually a number of different walks on the island, so I'll describe each one and then you can choose. So there's the boundary walk. This is one of the longer walks and it will appeal especially to people who love the coastline. And in fact, the tide is out today, so it'll be perfect for exploring the very old rock formations behind the beach. A good option is the loop track. Now, this is quite short, but don't be misled by that because it's very hilly and you need to be quite fit. The reward, though, is that you'll be able to see right down the length of the island and even across to the mainland. It'll be pretty as a picture on a fine day like today. There's the Pururi Walk, which follows one of the earliest trails that was built on the island. Unfortunately, the track's been damaged slightly by a storm, but it's still passable. The nice thing is, about halfway there's a table and chairs. They've recently been restored and painted, in fact, and it's a great place to eat your packed lunch and have a rest. You could also walk up to North Head. This is an inland walk. You'll hardly get a glimpse of the sea the whole way, but the attraction is you'll pass through a large area of very old native bush. The number of birds is amazing, including several rare species. You'll find some are quite tame, but please don't give them any food.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Okay, well, after your walk, the bus will take you to the regional park where you can relax for a couple of hours before going home. Now, if you look at your maps of the regional park, I'll just describe a few things you can do. So the bus will drop you at the park entrance right at the bottom of the map. One interesting place is the bird colony. To get there from the park entrance, you go up the path to the lake. About halfway round the east side of the lake, you need to turn off and take the path all the way out to the coast. You'll find the colony there, overlooking a little island. Now, if you'd like a swim, remember that not all the beaches are really suitable in this wind. For the safest place, follow the path north from the park entrance, but before you get to the lake, turn right and go down there to the beach. Something that people find interesting is the old ship. It's more than 100 years old. To get there, just north of the park entrance, you take the path which heads towards Okiwi Bay. Then walk along the coast a little way before turning right and following that path over to Rocky Bay. You'll see the wharf, go past that, and the ship is just along there. A long walk, but one that's well worth it, is up to Stony Batter. You follow the path right around the lake to the far side and keep heading north. But if you reach the water tower, you've gone too far. Before that, you want to turn off to your left and take the path to the coast. Now, where else is there? Oh yes, the Settlers Monument. That's popular. So from the park entrance, take the first path on the left and follow it around behind Okiwi Bay. The monument is out at the end there on the headland. Finally, if all this exercise has made you thirsty, there's a kiosk where you can get hot and cold drinks. It's easy to find beside the lake, right on the water's edge. Well, now, if anyone has any questions, feel free.
That is the end of Part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 2. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, come on in.
Thanks.
Thanks for agreeing to see us, Dr. Harrison. We wanted to talk over our work on the Managing Visitor Attractions module.
Right, you've been on placement at Davenport Zoo, haven't you?
Yeah.
So, what did you want to ask me about?
Basically, we're very positive about what we've seen at the zoo as a tourist attraction, but there are things we're more critical about.
What precisely?
Well, the numbers visiting the zoo are rising rapidly, and the quality of the visitor experience is good, for young and old.
Yes, and we'll certainly emphasise that. But from a business point of view, we saw some problems. They don't seem to employ their workers fully enough.
There really seem to be too many of them, which means they're wasting money on wages. They should streamline.
Yeah, and they could do more to get larger visitor groups. School groups, for example.
They put on great educational activities for kids, but there isn't much take-up by schools. Probably because their advertising isn't targeted enough.
Well, those are valid observations, but you should word them in such a way that they won't cause offence. Any advice should be constructive.
Yeah, it's a really interesting module, and I think work placements like these are particularly valuable on a course like tourism.
It boosts your confidence to think that the management is interested in what a student has to say.
Absolutely. Though I worry slightly that we're making business judgments based on so little experience. Companies might think we know more than we actually do.
I think you've got a point there, but don't get me wrong, taken as a whole, it's been a great module, and I think it's good to include such practical study alongside the more traditional, academically oriented ones.
It's been completely absorbing.
Which sometimes means we haven't devoted enough time to other parts of the course, you know?
Yeah.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
How are you getting on with your preparation for the presentation?
Not too bad, but we'd like to talk over some of our plans with you.
Fine.
We've got several sections. We're going to start with historical development of the visitor attraction.
How it started as a very small zoo and grew, especially in the 1990s.
We've got some great pictures of the way it looked in 1970.
Lovely. But remember, the emphasis of the presentation as a whole should be on the present.
And the future. Perhaps we should shorten this?
I think we should.
Yep.
We want to explain the management organisation.
I'm worried this section's going to be so long and boring for the audience.
Well, it'd be more interesting if you have a slide with a graphic showing the organisational structure. It won't seem so long if the audience have something to look at.
That's easy, because I got hold of a copy of one from the zoo last week.
Well done.
For the section on finances, we've only got basic information, and I wondered whether we need to interview the accounts director.
She's very helpful.
To be honest, I'd aim to keep this part to the minimum. It's not a major focus of the module.
Are you sure? I'm happy to talk to her.
Let's not use up time we could spend on more useful things.
Okay, we'll go with what we've got then.
Now, marketing's really important. We encourage you to give that a lot of emphasis.
That's our next section. And we'll distribute flyers from the zoo and say what's good and bad about them.
We could get the audience to give a couple of suggestions as well.
Nice idea.
Yeah, I like that. Keeps them engaged.
Yep.
And then we've got a section called Key Problems. We're not altogether happy with the name. I was wondering about Key Challenges.
I think that automatically gives it a more positive perspective.
OK then. And the concluding part is Further Research Needed. We're planning to mention one other tourist attraction, a local theme park.
Will that be enough?
Maybe 2 different attractions then?
OK.
OK. Well,
Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. In the last few weeks, we looked at ways in which different types of animals use their senses. And today, I'm going to introduce the topic of plant behaviour. And we'll look at the reasons why ideas about plants have been changing in the last few years. So, up until fairly recently, plants' lack of eyes, or ears, or noses, or mouths made them less interesting to many members of the public compared to animal species. And even by scientists, they were generally regarded as organisms which were essentially passive. However, in the last 20 years or so, evidence has started to emerge that plants can sense their surroundings in quite sophisticated ways. But because scientific attitudes towards plants and their capabilities had been fixed for such a long time, this evidence has been met with some disbelief. So, let's look at some of these recent findings that are starting to change the way some scientists view plant life. It all began with a Canadian study that looked at a species of plant known as the Great Lakes sea rocket. This is a wild plant which grows on beaches. In appearance, it's perfectly ordinary, with little purple flowers and a long stalk. But actually, the plant is far from ordinary. Normally, when the sea rocket detects other plants growing nearby, it quickly grows additional roots. This is so it can compete with these other plants for the available nutrients in the soil, by soaking up as many of them as possible. But scientists found that the sea rocket doesn't do that when the surrounding plants are related to it. And as even animals sometimes find this type of recognition difficult, such a finding was very unexpected. It was an ability that was previously unheard of in any other plant. Since then, it's been suggested that 2 other plants may have a similar ability. These are sagebrush and thornapple. It's been claimed that these plants can recognize the characteristics of their neighbours by sensing properties of the light that is reflected from them. The reason they are able to do this is that all plant species are slightly different to each other in this respect. So, each plant species has what you could call its own signature. Sagebrush and thornapple are able to recognize these. But scientists point out that this behavior is very different to the way that animals sense things. Another type of plant which can sense things in its surroundings is the dodder plant. This plant is different to most other species because it doesn't have the ability to make sugar by converting nutrients from the soil. This means that as soon as the dodder has sprouted from a seed, it needs to find another plant in order to survive. In other words, it's a parasite. Dodders infest a variety of food crops around the world as they wrap themselves like string around their target plants, and the effect can be devastating for farmers. It's particularly damaging to alfalfa, as well as to potatoes and different varieties of citrus. At first, scientists were puzzled as to how the dodder knows which plants to prey on. But now they found that the plant can identify a suitable host by sensing the chemicals that other plants release into the soil and air. What really surprised researchers was how extremely quickly and accurately the dodder identifies a possible host. They used time-lapse videos to study the mechanism and saw from these that when the dodder is trying to check out its environment, it rotates in a circle and then, without touching any other plants, it heads directly towards its selected host. It could sense reliably which type of plant it would grow best on. Scientists who were working on the project reported that the dodder sprout resembled a worm as it moved towards the other plant. Well, those are some examples of the new discoveries about plant characteristics. So, which direction is plant science likely to go in next? Many of the phenomena related to plant behavior that I've just described are now quite easy to observe, using up-to-date equipment. So, gradually, scientists are accepting the fact that plants are more capable than we used to believe. But although such plant behavior is often obvious, to some scientists...
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.